Go get the slut and the fuck-up and the rest of the peanut gallery. Tell them to come down for dinner. His voice is pounding through plaster walls, the consistency of papier-mâché between us, and they are just about as effective as trying to crinkle cellophane to cover over an unpleasant noise. With a drink in his hand, his insults are the sparklers before the M80. The sparklers fizzle, red-hot metal sticks litter the ground. My mother is covering the remains of his prelude with the white sheet of her silence, and we don't have ears unless directly spoken to. We are children. Elle scampers upstairs, all 8 years and 3.5 feet of her on a mission to retrieve the slut, the fuck-up, and the other 3. She is short and compact like the 2 oldest girls, Mars being the only alien who is half legs and lanky, but we all know she is only a rolled-out version of us. My father, with his flattened ass pillow under his spreading behind and his drink in front of him, waits for the food to appear. He yells, "Dinner time!" and expects the immediate stampede of 6 pairs of feet on the stairs and the silent assembly of 6 bodies at the table. There is a knock on my door. Dad says come down. Elle's little voice squeaks into the door jamb. We clamber down the steps. Me, the slut, and M, the fuck-up, who is fucking high, are the last to come down, though not the last to sit. My eyes stare at my lap. M smiles at me from behind her long brown hair and her glasses, then straightens her face into a snarl that makes her look even more high, and me even angrier that she didn't share. The fish tank bubbles behind my father. The wooden paneled wall behind the aquarium still has the bow and arrow toy that Jay shot at Famous last year and Dad confiscated, hung way too high for any of us to reach, its blue plastic plumes streaming down from the top of the red bow, emblems of their not listening. Though Jay is 16 months older than Famous, people always think they are twins. And though Famous is only 10, he thinks he's the oldest of us all because his birthday is in January. Famous is dark like my dad and like Elle. They are brown all year, when the other 4 of us are white like my mother and her translucent Jews from Eastern Europe. But we all look like each other. We have the same rounded faces and dimples and big, knowing eyes. It is a picnic indoors. Once the food is set on the blue dining picnic table, all the hands go for it at once. The boys want more meat the way they were taught to, and Em and I grab some to rival theirs, despite our father warning us about becoming fat girls. Salt is, can you pass it, chomping mouths oblivious to asking, me passing the salt from Famous to M salting, and then me ignoring my mother as she asks me to pass it since I'm not talking to her ever again. Elle sits next to Jay at the blue dining picnic table. Jay is dependably quiet underneath his shaved blonde hair and pale skin, except for his under-breath responses to Famous's instigations. "Dick," Jay says to Famous's elbow. "Shut up," Famous says back, thinking he's swarthy, like Dad says Italians are supposed to be. They throw these sorts of comments back and forth like a ball. I sit next to M, like always, so we can exchange knowing looks about my father and laugh. Mars sits on a bench alone, still wearing the birthday hat they gave her in school yesterday, a giant 6 on the front of the flimsy cone and the elastic digging a line into her neck. No one wants to sit next to her since she gets whatever she is eating on anyone in range. To let us know she is done eating and is now sleepy, she takes a clump of her vanilla frosting hair from nearest her face, twirls it around her pointer finger, and then sticks it in her mouth. The 3 dogs collect underneath the table, closest to the legs of whatever child might feed them, a bit of something snuck from plate to floor that makes a soft plopping sound when it meets the tile. If they are lazy, they lie under Mars, but avoid the knobby stub toes of my father that when brushed by fur kick in response, and that they know are attached to a man of significant height when he lumbers up off his cushioned ass and stands. Famous saunters over from the kitchen, where he was hovering over my mother and already starting to babble at her, carrying in his shoulders that are swaying over to us what everyone already knows will be the dominating conversation of the dinner table about his day at school, as well as the ghost-line hints of a broadening like that of a man that can challenge my father. He groans at the only spot being next to the food flinger. Hoping my father won't notice, he smushes himself in between Em and I. "You're sitting on my foot," Em says, louder than necessary. "Shh, no, I'm not." "Get over there next to Mars. You're the one who came last," I say, wanting everyone to get what he or she deserves tonight. "Hey, quit it over there. Famous, get up and sit next to Mars. What the hell are you doing?" my father interjects. Em laughs again to break the tension, and because whatever world she smoked herself into is funny. A smile passes over my face when I look at Em's squinty eyes, hoping my father will momentarily shift his attention to her and off me. Famous reaches over Mars and punches Jay in the arm, quick while my father looks at the fish tank and the trail of fish shit the huge Plecostomus has wrapped around the plastic plants. My mother comes to sit, holding a pot of something green that won't be eaten and has to sit in the worst spot, next to my father. Her hair is disheveled as always, a short brownish mob of stringy strands that haven't been tamed into any particular shape. Her face is pale and small, next to the fat, reddening face of my father. She gets back up and goes into the kitchen. "Why do you keep getting up? Make them get them themselves," my father, the stationary, ass-planted, and drinking authority, says. My mother ignores him and brings more silverware to the table. She is the only one who can get away with this. The forks and knives in her hands are the words she doesn't speak. She lays them on the table.
Faces and colors. In the new context, the combination of facial identities and colorings and clothing textured the board meeting in familiar tones. The melting yellow sunlight streaming through the windows welcomed, then halted before the regal presence of royal violet hues, kissing full lips, hugging swaying hips, and strolling down shirt fronts in predictable, elongated, triangular shapes of Western masculine attire. None of it had been planned, but even more astounding was its effect upon her senses. Perhaps it was the air of the day, or some underlying ancestral power, veering them towards a common, recognizable truth. She took notes. "Playing devil's advocate," Carl said. "I don't give a damn about Lonnie. He threatened his supervisor by shaking his finger above her head like gone postal, and involved the students in his craziness by addressing them with his nonsense about how he loved them, but was being driven away. Yeah, he needs help, but he needs to pay for what he did first." Carl's dark brown face flushed with a truth they all understood. His own upbringing had been similar, but now he was marketing manager of a major advertising firm. He enjoyed being on the board of nonprofits for the lift to his public profile and padding of his resume. He hadn't ripped off anyone to get there. The blue eyes of another black man at the conference table, the board president, waned softer with compassion. What he had not been through personally, he understood. In his line of work, he dealt in facts. At 46 years of age, he went to law school to become a defense attorney after years of serving the public as a transit employee. Since, he had worked alongside others in the Oscar grant matter. He had learned to give the benefit of a doubt from a naturally soft place in his heart. "It's true an idea of an intervention dregs up unknowns," he said. The mid-afternoon light caught in the sparseness of his nappy auburn hair, sprouting mainly above his forehead and around his ears. His ruddy complexion and soft southern lilt bespoke the slave plantation roots of his ancestry. The young man in question, the one who had betrayed everyone's trust and had ripped off the struggling nonprofit, would have been singled out as a rebellious runaway slave type and beaten regularly to within an inch of his life for seeking out a way of survival under nearly impossible circumstances and odds? Will he become violent and grab one of us as a hostage and threaten the worst? Asked one of the three women there. Will he understand our reasoning and go quietly away in handcuffs? Will he pull out a concealed weapon and instead of using it to go postal, simply put it quickly to his temple and squeeze? Continued the board member, her purple lips moist from an overlay of lip gloss, glistening in the warmth of the natural light. She thought of her own son, who would one day be the age of the con artist in question, 28. But that was 10 years in the future, and besides, her son's coddled talent as a gifted musician insulated him against destruction to any degree possible, albeit if only with the generous wingspan of a doting single mom. She shifted her hips in the leather bedroom armchair, and her enormous breasts, draped in the silky hues of Violet's kindred shades, swept the table's surface. The bank's president opened the door to bring in more refreshments and to disburse apologies for the stuffiness of the conference room, offering without asking to leave the door open until and or should a customer enter the lobby, at which time she would close it to reestablish a privacy that had already been breached. Her hues and shades of purple were every day intentional and bound up in some personal story of a miraculous nature, a lure she cast out each time a potential patron sat in the overstuffed chairs in her office. They complemented her hazel eyes, but not the artificial red of her hair, nor the jaundiced tone of her skin. He's a child, stuck in a 12-year-old body and soul, came the voice of the founding director from an Android phone on speaker. Back when the trauma occurred, the laptop video conference had failed. The FD was on the East Coast on other business. He thinks I've forgiven him. We can play off that. How many kids has he fathered that we know of? Said Carl. 4? I'm the mama he never had, the FD said. You can't just throw a black man to the wolves. By stealing from a nonprofit, he stole from every citizen in the community. But most importantly, he stole from his own children and from himself. He needs to be made aware of that. He also needs to be given a chance to make things right for himself, to see that he victimized us, although he seems to believe that he is the victim and that no one understands what he's been through. The DA can be really tough at times and not at all compassionate, the board president said. But it's worth a try, in my opinion. Get him to turn himself in. Then the intervention will happen as planned, stated the FD. We won't try to stop him if he refuses to stay and listen. We will have done our best, but we'll let him go. Our material losses will be covered by insurance. But how do you mend a broken boy after he has grown to manhood, having reinforced every waking moment the knowledge that he was abused by those who should have loved him most and looked out for him no matter what, but instead preferred to abandon him while they got it on with a syringe and needle? In the context of a borrowed boardroom, parading purples and violets, sometimes borrowed and blurred in shades of black.